In this video, I'm going to talk about how to successfully approach college algebra. Basically, the best practices that I'm discussing here apply across the board for any general math class that you may be taking in the future or may be taking even now. So to start off, college algebra is a 4 credit hour course, and you should be spending about 12 to 16 hours per week on college algebra. That includes the time that you're spending in class as well as the time that you're spending outside of the class. If math has traditionally been a challenging subject for you, you may need to set aside more time than this to study. This may also be true during weeks where you have tests or a final exam, or like the material is particularly challenging.
If you're taking foundations for college algebra as well, you'll need to spend an additional 4 to 6 hours per week if you include the class time and the outside of class time. That's a grand total of 16 to 22 hours per week. That's basically a part-time job.
Thus, you should intentionally budget the time you're required for each course along with the rest of your course load and various other commitments and responsibilities. This requires some intentionality on your part as far as budgeting goes. Obviously, you have this course to consider along with the rest of the course load that you may be taking, along with your personal commitments and responsibilities that you have. So keep that in mind and please plan accordingly. And this is not merely a recommendation, this course requires it. It is a challenging course for most students. Once you're through this entire video, you'll be able to see different ways that you could easily be spending this time if you're preparing appropriately for this course. My experience with some students is they say, all I need is a C or maybe a D to pass. And in the end, they miss the mark because they aimed low. Aim to do your very best and you're more likely to accomplish your goals. Make sure to come prepared for each class session. Your teacher on the first day probably expressed what is expected of you on a day-to-day basis, and they also probably communicate with you via your Blackboard announcements or your school email. So just make sure that you're in communication with your instructor and paying attention to the ways they communicate with you. And then also just make sure you're coming prepared with any assignments, reading over any notes, text, watching any videos for that day's lesson, and then also bring any questions that you may have. Print out the notes if those are provided by your instructor, and bring any materials that are needed for actually taking notes, along with anything else that your instructor expressed that is needed for that day. Make sure to attend all class sessions. Attendance alone is going to give you a far better chance of being successful than if you don't. And then come ready to participate. Make sure to complete all required materials like we already discussed, and just fully participate as you're going throughout the class. Ask any questions that come out throughout the class, and then when your teacher gives you time to work through problems, do so. Don't just sit there and passively wait for your teacher to maybe go over the problems. Try it out yourself. Give yourself a chance to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes while your teacher is present and able to help you. If it helps, have some scrap paper available so you don't feel like you're going to mess up your notes. And then you can always transfer over your final work later after class. If working in a group, make sure to carry out your role. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the more actively involved you are in the learning process, the more you're going to take away from that day's lesson. Every class you should come prepared to take notes. Note packets may be provided by your instructor, or you're to print them out beforehand and bring them to class, but this doesn't replace the fact that you should also be handwriting down certain notes. So during class, you want to make sure that you're writing down all the problems that your teachers are going over and their supporting work along with the instructions. And then you want to also highlight or jot down any other key formulas, concepts, or just material that stood out to you or that you want to remember. A key step in being successful in mathematics is reviewing your notes shortly after you've taken them, so hopefully that same day. And so when you're going through your notes, you're going to read through them slowly with the aim of comprehension. And you're going to redo any of the math problems that you already did during class, and you're going to see if you're able to do them without any aid or help. If you need to reference your notes to see and work out the steps and make sure you understand them, go ahead and do so. And then while you're going through your notes, make sure to also keep a log of any questions you have. At the end of the day, your notes should be a good study resource, and that is both in process and product. So some students learn best by actually rewriting their notes. This helps them kind of actively process what they're reading. And then others learn best by kind of taking notes over their notes. So they create index cards for key formulas and procedures. Just make sure that the index cards at the end of the day have all the appropriate information on them so you know when you're supposed to use them or why you're using them. And then you can also highlight key concepts, terms, formulas, objectives within your notes. And then if you did receive note packets and you also took handwritten notes, you may want to put these together into one good resource so you have that to study from when it comes quiz or test time. Now that you've gone through the process of reviewing your notes, it's now time to watch the corresponding videos. These videos will be your opportunity to practice some of the key objectives in the section. So as you're watching the videos, you want to make sure you're working out the problems along with the video. So you may want to pause so that you're able to complete steps before the video completes the steps. You may want to speed up, slow down. You could always rewatch the video, but just use it in a way that's going to help you learn the objective well. After attending class and reviewing the various resources, you should be able to accomplish certain objectives. And objectives are basically goals for that lesson. So you want to make sure you understand what each objective means and that you're able to accomplish it without aid. If not, you're not going to be ready for the quiz or the test when it comes around. So if you are struggling with a certain objective and what it means, you want to go back through your notes or the videos or the various resources that are available and relearn and just make sure you understand what's being asked of you and could repeat it if you were asked it on a test or quiz. Any questions that you have as you're going through this process, add them to your question log. Throughout the entire learning process, you want to log any questions you have. So whether that be attending class and your teacher didn't answer a certain question you had, maybe you read over the notes and the text and you still had questions, or maybe you viewed a video and even though it was explained, you just didn't quite understand it fully, or you went through the homework assignments and you were unable to fully grasp certain concepts. Either way, keep a log of these questions as you're going through this learning process. After reviewing that lesson's notes and watching the videos, you want to also complete the homework for that lesson in the same day. And while you're doing your homework, you don't want to rely heavily on your notes because you've already studied them. However, you can use them when necessary, and the same goes for tools on Pearson like View an Example and Help Me Solve This. And as you're going through the problem types, you don't want to just mock the problems and their procedures. You want to make sure to learn how to do them. And you also want to learn beyond the how. You want to learn when and why you're using that procedure. And then if you need to, you can always do a similar exercise and repeat until you understand that problem type. And then you can make notes of any questions you have and add them to your question log. Expect to have questions and plan accordingly. So you've independently gone through the learning process and you have questions at the end of the day. So you want to make sure to budget in a session or two a week where you either see a tutor or you see your instructor. So full-time instructors do have scheduled office hours and they generally would probably be comfortable with you just stopping by, but you could also set up an appointment. And then the Math Learning Center has tutors regularly available, both virtually and face-to-face. And you can either walk in or set up an appointment with them. And if you're going to do that, you want to do that 24 hours in advance if you're going to do an appointment. But ultimately, either way, you want to make sure that you're budgeting in these sessions ahead of time because you know you're going to have questions. You can bring any specific questions that you have, and hopefully you've been keeping track of these the entire time through the learning process. And after you're done working with your tutor or instructor, you can go back through the homework problems or the objectives that you had questions about and reattempt the problems and see if you're able to accomplish them now better.